The Sentinel is known to be reliable, fearless, disciplined, consistent, courageous, motivated, and skillful.
So do what you feel passionate about. Take chances.
All these qualities start from the mind. Your mind can be your worst enemy or your most powerful weapon.
The world becomes your library to help you become better at your craft.
Is this the dagger?
Learn how to achieve greatness and tap into the Sentinel mindset.
This episode is brought to you by The Arena. The Arena focuses on helping law enforcement and security professionals achieve their ultimate work experience, curriculum, and fitness goals. Visit thearenatoronto.com.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful, amazing day. We're right now in the Sentinel Mindset Theater, and I have with me one of our repeat and special guests, Steve Summerville. Who is Steve? Well, today, Steve is the CEO of an incredible program called Stay Safe. Stay Safe is a program that has, as I said before many times, a vast, I'm going to say, catalog of incredible courses and workshops and sessions that help you elevate your game as an organization. And with that being said, we're going to be focusing today on something that is kind of just breaking ground. It's kind of hot off the press. We're going to be talking about use of force. But before we do that, Steve, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Constantine?
Amazing. It's
Good.
always nice to see you.
Great to see you. We're right now starting day 4, day 7 as we do this podcast. We're here in early September. And a lot of things have happened since we last spoke, and a lot of things have gone on in this province. And let me go back a little bit here to explain to you why this podcast is probably relevant and going to be of interest to your viewers.
Let's hear it, yeah.
And secondly, you mentioned this issue of use of force. I call it the laying of the hands. A person exercising judgment when they decide to go physical with a particular individual for a particular reason or a particular cause. And then, of course, we need to take a look at the totality of the circumstances and potentially consequences. So you said use of force and use of force model, and depending on your age and or how much gray hair you may or may not have, I would usually say, well, to what era are you looking at? Original use of force models came out in policing in Ontario in and around 1993. There was the updates and the changeover to the 2004 model, the one I think likely you're quite familiar with, the visual graphic representation. Mm-hmm. But just as recently as a few weeks ago, actually in July, the Ministry of the Solicitor General adopted a new visual model. And it's not even really called a model anymore. It's called a training aid. But the training aid speaks to very, very clearly how we interact, how we engage, how we communicate with others with a specific focus to mitigate and or prevent the application of force.
Well, what is the difference, Steve, between, a model and a training aid?
That's a good question. Perceptionally, if I say to you model, would there be an expectation of conduct, or would there be an expectation of what you should or shouldn't do? Mm-hmm. Even with the 2004 model, Constantine, it was meant and intended to be nothing more than a training guide. It was intended as a means to help an officer or a police officer, which was adopted by the security industry with respect to their licensing provision. It was adopted as a means to articulate and to explain, and sometimes to give some context to content, not to justify, but to explain the rationale behind what you thought, what you saw, and ultimately it was what you may have done or not done under certain circumstances. The issue of a model can somewhat suggest that there's a pattern behavior that must be adhered to. A visual training aid is nothing more than something as a point of reference and as a point of understanding and clarification. And this new model, it's a 2023 version, and it's called the Police Public Interactions Training Aid, how we interact. But this particular training aid, unlike the model, really has a significant focus on the areas of conflict prevention, response, empathy, in a huge area in terms of de-escalation tactics. We speak about this model of verbal and nonverbal, and where this was first parlayed to this community, I was just recently testified in a coroner's inquest here in Ontario, just back in August. And this particular judicial body or issue, as a coroner's inquest, was called the Lagarde inquest, actually. That was the first time this new visual training aid was actually shown to a jury. It was actually explained in terms of the basis, because the jury was anticipated to come up with recommendations, and it was already provided to them as terms as some context and content that's coming out to perhaps meet some of those issues of the inquest and to assist the jurors with their recommendations.
So Steve, what caused this change? I mean, if all these new elements are added, like empathy and such, what caused this model to be looked at to say we need to make a change?
Why?
Yeah.
Why? Good question. I'm going to go back about 15 years. last 10 to 15 years in the province of Ontario, there have been a number of coroner's inquests respecting lethal force applications by police officers, where a number of recommendations are being provided by jurors to speak to death and potential means or methods that can be taken to prevent death or use or exercise of lethal force. And a lot from this, some of the recommendations have changed the model, changed the use of force model, really emphasize, if you will, verbal de-escalations, empathy, all those communication skills. Also, I'm going to draw your attention to 2016. The Provincial Ombudsman for the province of Ontario, Paul Dubé, released a report. It's called A Matter of Life and Death. And in it, it's just under 100-page report, review, a critique, an autopsy, perhaps poor choice of words, but in terms of a number of recommendations from the various coroner's inquests. But it really looked clearly at the type of training that was provided at the Ontario Police College, the overseer, if you will, the training entity for all police officers in the province of Ontario. And with it came a number of recommendations in terms as to, if you look at what's going on here today, people are saying, well, training's got to be impacted because police officers are following their training, but it's a training that had to come under scrutiny and review. And the visual graphic for the brand new training aid really speaks volumes. There's been a fair bit of verbiage being removed from the previous version on the model.
So there's an obvious change.
Oh, significant change. Very obvious, very visual changes. And the content is going with it. Matter of fact, you've caught us just before we start today. I believe this is the first time we're going to have a series of trainers throughout the province, security professional trainers, who are going to be taking this material, looking at its depth, looking at its up, bringing it back home and teach to various security companies and firms throughout this province. So we're starting it off.
And Steve, that's amazing. For the organizations that are going to start to adapt this very quickly, what are some things that you will probably notice that will help them deal with scenarios or conflicts that will give them the upper hand for those that are not?
Well, it's great. Before I respond to that, I just want to point out too, it's going to take roughly, according to the evidence we heard at the Lagarde inquest, perhaps 4 to 5 years before all frontline police officers in the province of Ontario get exposed to this material.
Why?
Time.
Okay.
Time, budget, availability of officers. Police officers right now in the current training program, attending the basic constable program at the Ontario Police College, are receiving the training. But we have a number of serving officers out there that through remedial training or block training as it's called, or annual training, it's going to take time to catch up. It's going to take time to spill that program out, and it's going to be slow.
Okay.
It's going to be slow. But having said that, just in response to your question, security companies and firms need to take, especially companies or entities or municipalities that hire security, prevention and security presence, need to take a look at how people interact with others. And that's through visual context, what you say, how you say it, the crisis management, the management of resistant behavior. We provide a training program called More of Management Resistant Behavior. How to speak to people, how to look at your tone, how to look at your pitch, how to look at your rate of speech, your body language. Is your body language consistent with my words? Verbal strategies known that will actually de-escalate a situation of a person's anxiety or anger or resistance, or perhaps even physical resistance, if you will, depending on the circumstances. Another huge component of this is to take a look at people who are living with and suffering with mental health, issues of addiction, people who are issues associated to sobriety or intoxication and or impairment, and showing a strong, empathetic process to try to predict why would a person be angry. For example, if you have a traffic accident, you're on the way to work today and you have a traffic accident, I should probably be able to predict that you'd be upset, you'd be unsettled with that. And with that, your emotions might be extremely high. So contextually, when I attend such an incident, I should be aware that there's been a traffic collision, people are upset. Let's take this to the security world. Let's take what's live events. In security. And your firm does a lot of special events, elite venues. If a patron's had too much to drink and they're being asked to go home, it's how you approach that patron, you tell that patron that we've got your back, we care, we want to make sure you're not hurt, and how we take reasonable steps to get them home. So that's sort of the basis of the context and the content of the material coming forward. We got a whole day here. We're doing these security professionals to take them through this program.
No, this is incredible. I'll tell you this. You said it's going to take up to 5 years, and I'm wondering if part of it also will be buy-in. And what I mean by that is that, will everyone buy into this? Now, obviously, some are going to be legislated to do it anyways because it's part of the training curriculum. But when I look at the private security industry, there's companies, many of them, that are struggling just to train to begin with, in general, right?
Yes, that's true.
And the world is getting more and more dangerous. The world is getting more problematic. People, as you said, are on edge. There's a lot of people that are going through life like they're dealing with so much problems, and if you do not have the proper training to be able, especially when you look at this model, to be able to come at least from the most simplistic area, come through an area of empathy or come through a different direction to help. Look, at the end of the day, you're trying to come in and win the situation.
Sure.
And you're trying to get that
without having to lay the hands.
Without having to lay the hands.
Physical force.
That's right.
You got it.
So something like this, Steve, that if someone is hearing this, how can they get more information? How can someone adopt this or bring this to their workforce?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, you made a great point I'd like to just address before I respond to your question, if I may. You talk about buy-in, and we've had different versions of a model depending on your experience within this industry. You got to create a buy-in. You need to look at something and you have to almost unlearn before you can relearn. Mm-hmm. And when an adult has adopted a particular program or a paradigm, and that's what you apply to your day-to-day duties, it may be difficult for some to suddenly say, okay, so was my previous training, was it valid? Is it not valid? Why am I being asked to change? I've never been in trouble. I've never been criticized as saying you're doing something wrong. Is this new version of this new training, is this political rhetoric? Is it nonsense? Is it meeting someone's agenda? Or is this real, serious, valid material that's going to make a difference? Mm-hmm. There's that buy-in. Mm-hmm. Secondly is the applicability of the buy-in. Mm-hmm. People who have received the training compared to people who haven't received the training. So your security firm, just for arguable numbers, you've got 100 security guards that say work for you. If you have a core group of 10 people that have the training, have this new visual model, compared to 90 people that don't, are the guards who receive the new training better prepared to deal with adversity? Are they better prepared to deal with potential violence or exposure to it? And by the way, might there be a different behavior compared to that 10 guards that have it compared to the 90 that don't? I'll turn that around. Are the guards more at risk? Will your guards who received the training, will they be better prepared in terms of personal safety and be able to mitigate or prevent risk, risk within the workplace? What about the public? What about the public? If they have one of your guards that received the new curriculum, are they safer? Are they going to be treated differently or better compared to the other guards that may not? And you as an employer, here's the other thing. If it takes a series of, or let's just say like the period of time, over that training period rolled out, at what point is your entire corporation, including your executives, what I like about it, I think change starts from the top down.
That's right.
Here you are, a business leader, an owner of a business, and you're talking about, you're promoting the program. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. That's important. So it's not a question of how to convince the boss or the owners or the CEO of a company that this is valid. You're out here professing this is required. So that's a major start. Mm-hmm. But in order to be able to solicit change, where do you start, the bottom or the top of a corporation? Right the buy-in is from the leadership. The rest will come. It's obvious. But my concerns are during this stage process where we're getting people trained up to a new paradigm, what are we going to anticipate? What are we going to expect? What is the correct behavior? What are we going to look for? And who, during this period of time, is there going to be a struggle to try to apply that material?
Absolutely.
How do you review it?
Look, those that have the higher level skill, those that have the higher level of training, those that are adapting to new change and new shifts are going to have the edge over everyone else.
Yes.
One thing that I think that a lot of people, in general, in life, are prone to is that, it's probably not going to happen. Something's not going to happen. Well, let me take the chance. Let me take the risk.
Right.
What are potential legal obligations? Not legal obligations, legal issues that one can face, whether you're a provider or whether you're an individual, if you don't have a leveled up training to help you in this situation?
That's a fair question. It may require a lawyer to respond. I won't give you a legal answer or response. Mm-hmm. I'll give you just my version or my perception. But I think anytime you have a change in curriculum or a change in anticipated behavior, there's always a potential litigious aspect to that. And I think this is very clear. This has now gone public in the sense of the material being offered. But lawyers, if you will, or people who are looking for a particular level of behavior may use that as a means to evaluate or vet the type of training or the validity of the training. Mm-hmm. We were speaking earlier before this podcast today about RFPs and quotes and whatnot. And are security people or people who are hiring security firms, are they looking for these changes? Mm-hmm. Do they see the validity of those changes, see how they make a difference at their events or their sites or their locations or their condominiums or whichever? And the validity of that also speaks to, are we prepared? Do we demand that in our security contracts?
Right.
And what is the challenge, if any? What is the challenge, if any, if you hire security firms to work with you that don't have this training and have not been exposed to that paradigm? I think that we owe it to our community. We owe it to the citizens. I think we owe it to, we work out of the Greater Toronto area. I think people living in and out of the Greater Toronto deserve the best product that they can acquire, because that would elevate the issues of safety and without any outdated paradigms.
I love that, and I agree with you. I'm a very big advocate of that, a very big advocate of training being something that one needs to level up on. Because today we're going to see very shortly a little bit of glimpse of you in your element, and you basically
banging on the window to get in, right?
Exactly, pouring into the students.
Yeah.
Could you give us like a little taste of like maybe one noticeable change that's happening in the model that from 2004 to now that we could potentially see?
Sure. I'd like you to take a look at the graph itself, the visual training aid, and it's just that word of communications. Look how that area, the green model, has expanded. And you've gone completely now around the whole model, but now incorporates some different components. You're talking about verbal and non-verbal options. Mm-hmm. And you're also taking a look at non-physical options as being an equation as part of that model. That's a huge part. The issue, just the insertion of the word individual or subject into your overall considerations. Right on the model itself, it talks about two concepts. We're talking about de-escalation. And the definition of de-escalation, that's not been viewed before on such a model or some form of visual training aid. And also conflict prevention. Not just response, but almost a proactive attempt to mitigate or prevent something from escalating. So it's a whole different focus right from the get-go. And even if you look at the extreme ends of the model, lethal force, in that particular area where unfortunately there are circumstances or certain sorts of behavior we may have to apply a higher level of force, but all the arrows, even on the graphic model, moving away from lethal force to say there might be other options. Think them through. That's fantastic to know that. I guess one last question I'm going to ask Steve is that, obviously this is something that you have taken on to kind of pass on the word and help people understand what they need to do. Are you happy to see these changes? I am, Constantine. Personal opinion, not a professional, personal opinion. This is long overdue.
Okay.
I've been an advocate of de-escalation training. I've been an advocate of talking people down all my career. I, on the stand, under oath, I've stated before that I'd much rather talk a person down than take them down. That's not been validated.
Okay. Amazing. So, Steve, StaySafeIP.com is the way to get a hold of you.
Absolutely.
Again, everyone today, I just cannot wait for this information to get pushed out. Stay Safe IP will have any contact situation that you need to get a hold of Steve. If you want this brought to your organization, we will be putting a little small snippets, not too much, because we want you to come right to the source and hear from that. Steve, I want to really thank you for this today.
In closing, stay safe.
Stay safe. Have a great day, everyone.
Cheers.
This podcast is brought to you by Executive Protection Lifestyle Canada. Make sure to drop by next week and don't forget to subscribe.